We want to start off with a reminder that we are not doctors. Before you make any changes or try something new, always consult with your doctor and medical team first. Chronic illness can vary from patient to patient, so it's always best to consult with your own doctor for what is best for you.
Hello and welcome to IBD Determined. I'm your host, Mason Harvey, and I speak from the role of patient, and I have Crohn's disease.
And I'm your other host, Michelle Harvey. I am Mason's mom, and I speak from the role of a caregiver on this podcast. And today's episode is one we had mentioned in last week's we'd be talking about, and it's going to be kind of like a reaction video, how we react to something, but
Not entirely.
probably not as exciting
Reaction and summary.
So it's kind of funny because I think this is fitting because right now Mason is taking a college course for the summer and it's English 100. And so you've been doing a lot of dissecting of articles, right?
We've been learning to summarize articles and dissect them. And so, yeah.
So this is kind of like, hey, well, we have an article. Let's do the same thing.
Yeah, let's summarize it for our podcast.
The thing is, though, we're not, as we always say, we're not doctors, we're not scientists.
We're not scientists either.
So we're just kind of like honorary members of this group because of Mason's Crohn's.
We're just on a podcast.
Yeah. And
we obviously do look up things.
Yeah, we're always learning. And so we like to share with you guys. And also, I think the key here is to help some of you read an article a little differently. And so that's kind of the hope here too. Again, we're not English experts.
No.
But you probably feel like one right now.
Yes. It's splendid.
But I think it's important. And I think there's a lot of reasons why this is important to discuss. So some of this is going to be over our heads. It's going to be over your heads. That's okay. We will link the article at the end so you guys can look it up, read it, and search for any vocabulary in there that you're not aware of, because we're not going to be able to teach too much of that today. We don't want to go too far into that. So let's jump into it so we don't make this too long. It's a hot day here. It's really warm
here in California.
Yeah, it's warm, and we're trying to avoid turning the AC as long as we can. So it's not too bad yet. So we're like, let's film early, and that way we'll be more comfortable and maybe glistening just a little bit. It's a little warm. So okay, so the article essentially was like on the holy grail discovery for the root cause of IBD. And this was probably like around June 5th, the first week of June or so. I think maybe even a little earlier, maybe May when this came out. I'm not quite sure, but it's fairly recent, 2024. The reason it stood out to me is because I saw it all of a sudden popping up everywhere in the Crohn's groups. And then I started getting messages and people sending the article to me. And then
people
emails.
Kept telling us, oh, there's been this discovery, which, I mean, obviously it's not their fault that they're doing this. They're reading the article. The article says what the article says. Yeah. And they're like, oh my God, they found a discovery. Yeah. And we were excited too. And then we're like, well.
So that's kind of how we do things. We're kind of optimistic, but still a skeptic, because I think in anything you read in the media, you have to be very careful because you have to look for the motives behind it. You know,
they want to get your attention. So
the headline,
if they have a boring headline, they're going to read it. You're like,
right. Like something might have been discovered that might be, it's like people are going to ignore it.
They want to sound very like to grab your attention, very interesting, exciting, big news.
That's
and to get a lot of attention, you might have to exaggerate something.
Right. And I think that is how our media does a lot of stuff. And so I think it's important, especially in today's age, especially with AI and articles being written. We're not sure who wrote the article.
Is it even written by humans?
Yeah, it's very important to really look at these things carefully before you get too excited. And and especially like, I think sometimes people only read a headline. I've done that. Like, I know I'm in a rush and I'll see a headline. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to come back to this, but I get all excited. Like, oh, wow. And
then you read the article and you're like, oh.
An article will have a little more details. And so we're going to get to that. So number one, look for the motives. Understand that the media creates a good title, like we were just talking about, and then actually read the article. Before you share something, read the article. And I mean, I don't mean like share, like if you want to send it to me and you haven't read it, that's fine. But when you're sharing something online and you're making a claim, make sure you actually read
Mhm.
the article. In all of this, I still didn't hear the words "the exact cause" of IBD. And like, why is this an article?
Mhm.
Why did this make it through? We know a lot of people in the IBD world, and a lot of things are not publicized. And
Mhm.
so we hear a lot of things that they're working on and research, and it's not really talked about. So why did this get a headline? So obviously to me, that suggests it's a little more important. It's a little bit bigger of a deal. So
It's
I like
interesting.
to learn, like to ask questions.
Mhm.
And
Read the
so,
article, talk about it, go to other sources, see what they think about it
and one of the things I asked too is, are they going to be looking for funding? Because a lot of times these are research groups. And how do research groups operate?
by getting
By
funds.
getting funds. And so if they don't get any attention or any media publicity, then they're not going to get extra funding.
Mhm.
So if they have this exciting new announcement and maybe they're going to get funding or backing. So I don't know in this case, I'm not saying that's what this is, but that's one of the things I look for is the motive behind the research as well and behind the announcement to see if potentially they're looking for investors. So that's something else. And
Yeah.
another thing is I usually wait to hear what the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation says.
It's because 'cause they're all about everything. If there's
Right.
something about IBD, they're most likely gonna respond to
So
it.
they're trustworthy.
Yeah.
We trust them too.
They do all the research, they do studying, they do all that stuff. Well, they don't do all of it, but they
Right.
they do
They're
maybe like 80%
we're
or
just throwing
more. I
percentages
don't
out
know.
there. We'll
I'm
just
just
say
throwing
that.
it out there, why not?
But it's important to me because they're not biased
Mhm,
and they're going to tell you like it is. They're not going to give you false hope. And
mhm.
that's
Which
one
is
of
good.
my biggest problems with these is that is it giving false hope? Is it getting people excited for something that
Doesn't ex
doesn't
actually
really
exist.
exist or
Yeah.
isn't really known? Like, did you do all the research before you wrote this article? Because it's going to break people's hearts if they get excited and they think there's a cure. And then people might stop donating to other
Because they think there's
places
already some
because they think
yeah.
that, well, they found it.
Yeah,
So,
they found it, so we don't need to donate anymore.
right.
What's the point of donating?
And it's like, well, there's all these other researchers and all these other foundations that could use support because it doesn't stop yet. So that's why it's important to me that these headlines don't distract and that they're accurate. So basically, what we're seeing is like, how accurate is the headline?
Mhm.
And we're going to get started. We're going to jump in. This might be a little boring, guys. We'll do
Yeah.
our best.
Feel
And
free to sleep while listening
don't
to us a
sleep.
bedtime story.
No,
But
no.
if you're really interested in what we're talking about, feel free to mark down everything we're talking about.
Or if you kind of are listening and you space out a bit because
Mhm,
you're like, I don't know what they're talking about. Just again, we're going to attach the
mhm,
article so you can go back and look at it. But this is mostly for our reaction, and we're going to do our best. It is very sciency. It's got a lot of medical terms. It's going to be a little more tricky, and so I think just stick with us,
and
and
if you don't
we'll
understand a medical term, you can
look it up.
look it up, yeah.
That's the most important thing. Also,
Dictionary, Google, whatever.
that's what you're supposed to do, right? Instead of
Mhm.
like assuming, oh, I know what that word means.
Yeah, I know what that
Maybe
is.
look it up, especially if it's something that has to do
Mhm,
with health. So the headlines that I saw were all pretty similar. I just pulled quotes from different ones. The Holy Grail was mentioned several times in different ones.
mhm.
Another one is researchers discover major causes of IBD, while another one was scientists uncover the cause of IBD.
Which if that was true, that would be insane.
And so you can already see the difference though. Like they're by saying it's the Holy Grail, they're putting a lot of importance on
Mhm,
this. But then one article said the major cause, not the cause, just
mhm.
a
The major
major
cause.
cause. And another one said they uncovered
Uncover
the
the
cause.
cause, not the major.
Right.
They
And
uncover the
those are what are in the
cause.
headlines. And so that's what people are reading. So what I did is there were so many articles on this. I looked through all of them, so you didn't have to.
Yeah.
And I looked through all of them, and a lot of them did look to be like very similar. And so it was a lot of the same kind of stuff. But then what I did is I saw someone named James Lee mentioned, and he is the group leader of the Genetic Mechanisms of Disease Laboratory at Crick and consultant gastroenterologist at the Royal Free Hospital and UCL. He is the one who led this research. So why this is important is I searched him.
Mhm.
So instead of relying on all the articles that the media published, I went straight to the source. And that's something else you guys can do. There wasn't any links to this. I just went and
Looked
looked
it
up
up, yeah.
and I found it and they had a whole article on it. So we're looking at what he wrote about it because or maybe not what he wrote, but
Mhm.
what somebody wrote for him.
Yeah.
But it is from the actual source as opposed to what was told to the media and what might have been misleading. So just with keeping that in mind, we're trying to be very accurate here. So, one of the statements he said is IBD usually develops in young people and can cause severe symptoms that disrupt education, relationships, family life, and employment. Better treatments are urgently needed. Okay, call to
Mhm.
action,
Yeah,
right?
that's good.
So, using genetics as a starting point, we've uncovered a pathway that appears to play a major role in IBD and other inflammatory diseases. Excitingly, we've shown that this can be targeted therapeutically, and we're now working on how to ensure this approach is safe and effective for treating people in the future. So, that's a direct statement from
Mhm.
James Lee, and that is on the website, that is on their research site. So, that's where I got that. And I feel like, yeah, he's excited. It
Mhm.
sounds like he's trying to get
That's
other
good.
people excited about this. So, the Francis Crick Institute is the actual name of the institute. So, if you guys want to look it up yourselves, you can.
Francis
And
Crick Institute.
yeah, and so again, I'm going to have the link, but you can mess around. You can go on their site and look at other things. So
The link will be in the description. Yeah,
yes,
okay.
it'll be in there. And so let's jump into the article.
I'll read
The first
this.
part,
I'll
okay,
read
so this
this.
is what their article opens with.
So it opens with about 5% of the world's population and 1 in 10 people in the United Kingdom are currently affected by an autoimmune disease, such as IBD, an umbrella term for Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis.
Mhm.
These diseases are also becoming more common, with over half a million people living with IBD in the United Kingdom as of 2022, nearly double the 300,000 previously estimated. It's
So
crazy.
yeah. And so what that first of all tells us is that this was done in the UK.
Mhm.
So that's where this research took place. So important to note,
Mhm.
that's where it took place. It says about 5% of the world's population are affected by an autoimmune disease.
Autoimmune
So
disease.
key words right there.
Mhm.
Autoimmune disease.
Not IBD.
Right. That includes all autoimmune disease. And then they say such as IBD.
Mhm.
So IBD is included in that group. So
It's
just
not like they're
important
saying
to
affected by IBD,
right
they're saying affected
by
by autoimmune
autoimmune
disease,
disease.
including IBD.
Right. So as you're reading that, it's important to keep in
Mhm.
mind. This is fun, right? Just like
Yes.
college. This is great.
Yay, college
So
is fun.
so we're keeping that in mind as we're reading this, what that 5% of the population of the world's population they're talking about with autoimmune disease.
Despite increasing prevalence, current treatments do not work in every patient, and attempts to develop new drugs often fail due to our incomplete understanding of what causes IBD.
So what stuck out to me here, what's going to be important is they're saying that the often attempts to develop new drugs fail because there's a lack of complete
Understanding, yeah.
understanding. And so what that leaves room for me to see in here is they're saying that unless we have the complete understanding,
Full understanding.
full understanding. So basically what causes Crohn's disease
The main
specifically,
cause.
what causes ulcerative colitis specifically. Yes.
Not just a major cause.
Right, the main cause,
Mhm.
the actual source. So otherwise, how are so new drugs are going to continue to fail unless we have that complete understanding.
Here's an interesting question, though. Is there technically a main cause for Crohn's disease?
Mhm.
Because Crohn's disease is different for everyone. And on a
Right,
different scale, I'm severe, other people are not severe. They can treat it by eating a different diet. I have to do biologics. Other people do biologics. Some people can't even treat it with biologics and they have to do steroids because biologics don't even work and nothing else works.
right,
Is it can't all be the same cause at that point because they're so different, they're so severe, and certain biologics don't work for some people because the gene or whatever in
yeah.
it.
So
So,
it
but once again, I'm not a scientist,
yeah,
but in my mind, if a Stelara worked for me but doesn't work for someone else, that makes me feel like that there must be a different cause for each one.
right.
So
And
there wouldn't
that's
really be a main
I
cause.
think that's a great question because it goes more back to like the IBD umbrella term for it,
Mhm.
and even further back to autoimmune disease because there's other aspects of this disease where it affects your eyes. It doesn't just affect your GI tract.
No.
And so if we're looking at something that's just affecting the GI tract, are they looking also at the arthritis? Are they looking at
How it can affect
the
hair too.
uveitis, the eyes, your skin? So it's so yeah. So so this makes me ask more questions when I read this. And that's a really good question because how do we know what the cause is when everybody's symptoms are different?
Because someone might develop a cure,
Yeah.
but it might only work for a percentage of the people with Crohn's
Right.
disease
Right.
or IBD
So it's
or
like, when are
yeah.
they going to find, like, whereas, like, is there a key that unlocks all of it? That's kind of the question.
In research published in Nature Today, scientists at the Crick journeyed into gene desert, an area of DNA that doesn't code for proteins, which has previously been linked to IBD and several other autoimmune diseases.
And what jumped out at me there was they were exploring something that has already been linked to
Mhm.
IBD. So we're talking about this article is supposed to be about a brand new discovery, the holy grail, like, so it's like, okay, so I try to pick up on things where it's like they say it was previously this area
And
they're researching has already been linked to IBD and
it's not like she just
several
figured that out.
no. And so it's been linked to IBD and several other autoimmune diseases.
Mhm.
So that's interesting because that suggests that this area has already been researched. So that suggests they already had an idea kind of from other research. It's already been done. And this is again why research is so important
Yeah.
because it builds. So they are based on previous research, they were able to take it a little bit further and take a look. So, anyways, I think that's important to note. Previously been linked to IBD, important to know.
Mhm.
All right,
Now,
go.
the next one, they found that this gene desert contains an enhancer, a section of DNA that is like a volume dial for nearby genes, able to crank up the amount of proteins they make. The team discovered that this particular enhancer was only active in macrophages, a type of immune cell known to be important in IBD, and boosted a gene called ETS2 with higher levels correlating with a higher risk of disease.
Keywords was enhancer.
Mm.
That is something that is responsible for being like a volume dial, like something that you can adjust. And other keyword that stuck out to me was type. The macrophages are a type of immune cell known to be important in IBD. Known. This is something already known, right? This is again. So this is still not. We still haven't got to new news yet.
Mhm.
This is still talking about something that was already known.
Known.
Yes. And then boosted a gene called ETS2 with higher levels correlating with a higher risk of disease. So higher levels are going to correlate with a higher risk of disease. So again, risk,
Mhm.
maybe not cause, maybe not for sure, but a risk factor. Well, the super exciting part
Mhm.
that is supposed to stand out
Like they
that
found a cure or
right. And
something.
I'm not saying that they didn't discover
Yeah.
something.
They
Like
did discover something, but
right,
it's
but it's still we're still trying to uncover that and its relevance to how excited everybody was for this article to see if this was really something that is a really, really big deal or if it's just kind of a continuation. So that's kind of what we're doing. So no judgment. I mean, they
obviously they discovered something, and
right.
it's important to discover things because Crohn's is like a puzzle, and you need more
You
pieces to
do.
connect and connect.
And I think that's my thing is this another piece to the puzzle or is this a whole new puzzle? Did they
Mhm.
discover? It's like a whole separate puzzle that is like, hey, this is the actual, we've been studying the wrong thing. Or is this a continuation of it, which is equally important? I'm not saying like it's not important. I don't want to I don't want to take light these researchers and these scientists and what this institute has done is very important. And the fact that they've dedicated their lives and it's to this is so important. So it's not to knock them at all. And I hope that's not, I don't want this to come off that we're like, oh,
I mean, yeah,
but I
but
want to get to the part in the article like where
that found the cure.
that is
Well,
like the
not the
light
cure,
bulb
that found the
moment.
cause.
Right. The light bulb moment. I'm still excited to see that. So let's see. We're going to keep going.
Mhm.
Let's see if they
Could
get
be
there.
still on here.
Right.
Using genetic editing.
Which let's really quick. Genetic editing.
Mhm.
On Medline Plus, I just did a quick little vocab for you, is a group of technologies that give scientists the ability to change an organism's DNA. So we're talking, when you say genetic editing, we're
Mhm.
talking about changing DNA.
That's
That's a
that's
big deal.
that's crazy.
That's a
Yeah.
big deal. All right.
Okay, so using genetic editing, the scientists showed that ETS2 was essential for almost all inflammatory functions in macrophages, including several that directly contribute to tissue damage in IBD. Strikingly, simply increasing the amount of ETS2 in resting macrophages turn them into inflammatory cells that closely resemble those from IBD patients.
All right. The ETS2 was essential for almost all inflammatory functions
Almost.
in macrophages, for almost all.
Mhm.
So again, Nothing
Not
is
every.
100%
Yeah.
science. There's no statistic, there's no numbers, just almost all inflammatory functions in macrophages. Macrophages are already known to us, just so everybody knows out there. If you look it up and they're going to be tied to your immune system. It's already something that is known. So macrophage is not a new discovery. So that's not what we're looking at still. So
Macrophage, yeah.
not so macrophages are not the discovery here. But the ETS2 I think is more of the key word because that's essential for almost all of them.
Yes.
So it also including several that directly contribute to tissue damage and IBD. So almost all, first of all, so not all inflammatory functions, and out of that, it will include several, which is what number is several?
What
What are we
number is
looking at
that?
yet? That directly contribute to tissue damage and IBD. So directly contribute. So there is some correlation there that this ETS2 has something to do with tissue damage and IBD. I think the other key thing here is that they talk about how by simply increasing the amount of ETS2 and resting macrophages, which means I think your immune system, to me, what that's suggesting, your immune system isn't going haywire. It's
Mm,
at normal. It's not fighting something. But when they increase it, the resting macrophages, it turned them into inflammatory cells. So kind of like what that says to me, what happens to you when you go into a flare. So they're kind of replicating a flare. I this is just
yeah,
my take on it,
yeah.
guys. You don't have to be a you shouldn't have to be a scientist or a doctor to read
Mhm.
these articles and understand them. That's the key thing. You should be able to be just like one of us and get the idea behind it.
A part about that that stuck out to me is when they said, in resting macrophages, turn them into inflammatory cells that closely resemble those to IBD patients. It's not turn them into inflammatory cells that resemble those I closely. They said
They
closely.
said the word
So
closely.
it's not saying they are, it's not saying they look like them.
Right.
We still don't have the exact inflammation
And
cell.
they also say resembled,
Yeah,
not
resembled.
replicated.
No, not replicated.
So it's
Yeah.
just some it looks like it, but it is worth noting that if they were able to do that, and it could be something similar, it
Mhm.
could
It
that
could be. It could be.
what is happening, something causing that flare. And so it's like, what happens to me? I guess my question is like, well, what happened to that ETS2? Why, if does everybody have this, or is this just found in Crohn's? So again, I have more
Mhm.
questions, but we'll keep reading on.
The team also discovered that many other genes previously linked to IBD are part of either ETS2, part of the ETS2 pathway, providing further evidence that it is a major cause of IBD.
So the team discovered many other genes previously linked to IBD. So these were already, so they're not saying the team discovered these. The team discovered based on genes that were already linked to IBD. So again, this is where research is important. They were able to build off of research that these previously linked to IBD are part of this ETS2 pathway. So there's a connection. So maybe that's the first time they've made that connection, which would be important.
Yes,
So it says it provides further evidence that it is a major cause. So that's the first time they say like a major
major
cause.
cause.
Again, not
Not the cause,
right, not the actual cause,
the major
but a
cause. Yeah.
major cause, which could mean there's still other contributing causes,
Mhm.
not the only one. I think that's really an important word, saying
Mhm.
it's not the only cause. I
Like
think that's
the
important.
major cause being like maybe the biggest, and then there's little other causes that sprout out from the main one. And then
Right.
maybe once they figure out the main biggest clause, they can start branching out and getting the littler ones.
And like that could also do like what you were talking about earlier. People have different symptoms and
Mhm,
different things. And so maybe it is different, different ones affect different, maybe some are turned, the ETS2s turn more up in
mhm.
certain people, maybe it's not as much in others, maybe. So I don't know.
And
Interesting.
and maybe here's how the main clause might work. Main cause, not
Uh-huh.
clause.
You're used to your
Yeah,
essays?
causal verbs.
He's like, yeah.
Uh, but how the main cause might work, I think I'm not a scientist once again, but how I think they might work is if you look at biologics working for patients with Crohn's disease, and
Mhm.
you look at the one that is working the most, let's say Remicade, they always try that one first. Maybe that one targets the main cause.
Mhm.
And so we can figure out what Remicade is attacking, and we'll figure out the cause for that. Or
Right,
the
because that
actual,
approaches
yeah,
it
the cause, I
differently.
know it. So
Right, and so and something we're gonna keep I wanna make sure I don't forget at the end, because something that is really important as you're reading this is to say, did they find a cure or a new treatment? So we're gonna see where this is going. Like, are they saying like,
Where are they
"Hey,
leading into?
we found it, we know how to cure it," or are they saying we found a cause, we'll know how to treat it? So is this more, I guess, is this more treatment again? Is this just another treatment option? Is it going to be the only treatment option? Or like you're just saying, will it be used in conjunction with other
Mhm.
options? So those are my questions again. So we'll keep going because
Yes. Specific drugs that block ETS2 don't exist. So the team searched for drugs that might indirectly reduce its activity. They found that MEK
mm-hmm.
inhibitors, drugs already prescribed for other non inflammatory conditions, were predicted to switch off the inflammatory effects of ETS2.
Okay. A lot of important stuff in there.
Hmm.
So, because some of the articles that I had read made it seem like they already that this was exciting because there's already drugs that treat this. And when I read this, they said that the specific drugs that block this ETS2, so it's not like turning up the volume and going all over the place, they don't exist. And maybe you don't want to block it. Like, is there another purpose to this ETS2 that you like what you're already doing with stuff
Yeah,
you take?
yeah.
It's suppressing your immune system. So is this immune suppressing? Is this, is this going to be something else? It's just so anyways, those were the questions. So specific drugs don't exist.
Mhm.
But then they say they found that those MEK inhibitors are, which they're using them in cancer. And this is how it seems to go for,
Yeah,
this
the
is like
because
another story
Remicade was originally gonna be used
for
for
cancer.
cancer,
And it didn't, yeah,
and so then it went for
for
Crohn's
tumors.
disease.
But what's interesting is they already have these that they're using to treat other non-inflammatory conditions. And they're predicted to switch off the inflammatory effects of the ETS2. Predicted. So they
Predicted?
haven't yet proved this. They haven't yet tried this. It's a prediction that those could work.
Okay.
So this is all important. So to me, this is still saying they don't have a way to treat it. So again, like more research will be needed, more work into other areas too. Other people don't need to stop. They need to keep going because this still suggests to me they didn't find the only thing. They didn't find the cure yet. And so yeah. So anyways, so MEK inhibitors are already being used. They're in use, but it's not specifically for the ETS2. So important to note.
The researchers then put this to the test and discovered that these drugs not only reduce inflammation in macrophages, but also in gut samples from patients with IBD.
So that's good. So they're
Hmm.
testing it. So now we know, okay, they are testing it,
That's good.
but they did reduce inflammation in the macrophages, which I would think would be expected
Hmm.
because that is something I believe already being treated, just not in particular the ETS2. So that doesn't really surprise me. That makes sense. But in they tried it also along with just reducing inflammation because it's your body can have inflammation. You don't have to have IBD. You can have inflammation without having IBD.
Anyone can have
So
inflammation.
important note there, it reduced inflammation. They don't say where, they don't say what, but then they do. They said also, so in addition to that, it was also in gut samples. Gut samples. So it doesn't sound like they actually saw results in people.
No.
They took either like a blood test or they took like a biopsy or whatever they did, and they tested those samples with it to see how it would react. So it doesn't seem like they're at the phase yet where they've actually tested this,
Testing on people.
and it's not to that phase yet, which is interesting because when an article is that explosive and that exciting, I don't know. I think that is usually that does happen at the beginning of something, because people are very exciting. So I don't think it's misleading necessarily with
No.
that. But I do think that we still don't know enough to have
About it.
that headline.
To call it the Holy Grail.
Right. Not sure yet. So so still
It
seems
could
kind
be
of like
something more interesting
a
that
little bit of clickbait to me, it seems like, but
hmm,
still truth to it. So it's
truth
still,
and clickbait,
yeah.
a little bit of both.
And so let's read more about MEK inhibitors, what they said.
Okay. As MEK inhibitors can have side effects in other organs, the researchers are now working with LifeArc to find ways to deliver MEK inhibitors directly to macrophages.
And so I believe what they're trying to do is like bind them because the amount of damage they do is something to take seriously. One of the things to consider, a lot of cancers are treated and then cured and you stop with the treatments. Some people cannot be cured, so they do require ongoing treatments.
Constant
And
treatments.
with IBD, it's like, okay, so are they saying to me what it's saying so far is this would require constant treatment. So it has to be safer because you're not going to be taking this for 2 months
Mm.
or a month or a year. You're going to be taking this for life. So it's important that they test these things and make sure that they are safe over a long period of time.
So this doesn't sound like a cure.
It still doesn't sound like a cure to me. No, it sounds like they've made a breakthrough with more information than they had
It might be
previously.
getting closer to a cure, but
Right.
it's
So I
still
think
not
there's more
a cure.
information, which is important. All of that is important. So it's still important. But again, I think the headlines were a little bit exaggerated,
Mhm.
but that's my take. I don't know.
Yes.
And maybe they're not. I don't know. So I did a little bit of research on the MEK inhibitors. I went to the cancercenter.com and some of the potential risks. So these are the things to consider because it's like, are they offering to treat you with something that is going to have less risk than what you currently are taking?
Mhm.
Or
Or
are
is
they
it just
just
as
giving you
risky?
another treatment that is just as risky, if not more? Because at that point, is it really progress? I don't know what the progress is. I think progress to me with this disease is finding ways to treat it that do not damage your body,
Mhm.
that you can attack directly what is attacking you, as opposed to suppressing too much that could cause other issues. So that is important to me in a new treatment that they are finding it making it more safe and
Safer for anyone
effective.
to use. Yeah.
Yes, and not creating something else that is going to
Creating
be
another problem. Yeah.
the same thing.
So some of the potential side effects of MEK
And
inhibitors.
these are the more common ones.
Yeah.
So these are what listed more common.
So rash, nausea and diarrhea, which there we go. That's a
That's Crohn's,
Crohn's disease.
another part of Crohn's.
So sensitivity to sunlight, which
You have
is
that with one of the ones you take. You have
yeah,
to be careful being in the
which
sun.
isn't helping anything. It's not changing anything.
Right.
We still have that problem with this.
Mhm.
Swelling, sores on the mouth and tongue, which that also has happened with Crohn's disease.
Uh-huh.
Fatigue does
Crohn's.
happen.
Uh-huh.
Loss of appetite does happen.
So those are not good side effects for someone with
No,
IBD, right?
it's gonna make
Because
it worse.
it's giving you the same side effect that it's trying to remove. So it might be removing that symptom from your IBD because again, not curing it. This is not you're not going to get these side effects because it's curing it. You're going to get these because it's masking it. So if you're going to take away the
Mhm.
symptom and replace it with the same symptom, is that
Is that
beneficial?
is that
And
helping?
so and again, these are common with all biologics. Like I'm not just but these MEK inhibitors are not something I'm super familiar with. So that
Mhm.
seems like important. And then less common side effects. So these are ones that do
Or
occur,
rare,
not as
more
much,
rare.
which thank goodness
Yes,
because these
thankfully,
are
these are very bad.
yeah, so those are
These include bleeding, blood clots, heart, lung, or liver damage, muscle issues, sight problems, Crohn's,
mhm.
and skin infections.
So infections could sound to me again like your immune system is being compromised. Also,
Mhm,
so the heart, lung, liver damage, those are same things with the biologics already. So it sounds again like risky treatment. So
mhm.
to convince me that this is a good thing and what you're treating this with is better and is the new holy grail, like I feel like
It should be
it
safer.
should be safer. And so if they can figure out a way to bind these where they don't cause all these side effects and they can just go straight to that ETS2, then maybe they have something. They
Mhm,
also talk about fertility risks, and so that's kind of scary too, and some of the ones can in both men and women, and so that can be something very important. So let's continue back to the article. We're almost there, guys.
yes.
So
We're almost there. We're almost
we're
made to
almost
the
at the end.
end.
It's not too
Stop
long.
yawning.
Yeah, yeah. Don't space out. Just pay attention. Keep going. You can do it.
This'll be fun, hopefully.
Yeah.
Let's see. So this next one is volunteer participants from the NIHR bioresource with and without IBD provided blood samples that contributed to this research. The research was funded by the Colitis United Kingdom and the Wellcome Trust, the MRC, and Cancer Research United Kingdom. And the researchers worked with collaborators across the United Kingdom and Europe.
Okay, so what is important here is they're kind of like citing their sources in a way.
Yes.
So whenever there's research going on, that's the other thing. Like one of the things that's not in here is not the pool. It might be in other articles. I don't know if I don't think I saw it in here, but it's always important to know the research pool you're working with, the amount of people tested. Did they test 10 people?
Or did they
Did
test
did
1,000?
they test 1,000? And what were they under a treatment when they were being tested, or were they not being treated
Mhm,
and when they were looking at these things? So were they in a flare, active flare? Were they not in a flare? So I have a lot of questions that are very important whenever you're talking about volunteers. Research, it's so important to know the data and what is being tested. Maybe and even diet. What are these people eating? What are
mhm.
their lifestyles? Do they smoke? Do they drink? So there's a lot to consider when you talk about research and the results they got. So what I do like that they did right is they did mention the participants were volunteer, so they were not paid. That's
Mhm.
also important. So volunteer, and they did use some with and without IBD, but they provided blood samples. Anyways, important. It's always good to make sure an article has these things and to look for that. Just a
Something interesting to me, can you even do this with Crohn's disease is my question. Because when people test, like, I don't know, the COVID shot, whatever it
Mhm.
was, there's all these different ones. They have to test and they do something called placebo, the
Yeah.
placebo effect. So they give someone one that doesn't do anything, and then they give someone else someone that does something, and they
Yeah.
see if someone is just imagining that it's doing something.
Mhm.
Or if the other person thinks it actually is doing something because they actually got it, you
Right.
know?
Right.
Or yeah. Could you do that with Crohn's? Because with Crohn's disease, you can't really just say, "We're gonna just give this to you, and you're gonna have to see if it's real or fake," you know? Because you can't do that. You can't waste time with someone's Crohn's disease.
Absolutely. That's a good question. That's something that they will have to consider when they go further along in their research. It's a
It's
really valid
it's one thing with
thing.
Crohn's disease, you can't waste time with finding treatments.
Yeah, and so, like, 'cause these ones, like, this suggests to me this is they're probably at least 5 years out from anything further because there is not a drug yet currently. Now they could just take what's already out there and try to modify it, but that's gonna take time too. So, this isn't something like you guys are gonna like, you still need to find something right now. If you're reading this article, you still have to get under control because in the amount of time it takes to find this, you may have lost body parts at
Mhm.
that point. You may have severe issues that cannot be reversed. You may have had to have blood transfusions, surgeries, all
You
that.
might need
Yeah,
steroids.
you could have growth issues already because if this is a kid, then that's the difference between
Mhm.
them being an adult and a child, that amount of years. So that's all important. So, anyways, yes, we'll get back to this, but good, good,
Yeah,
good,
you
good sidetrack. Yeah, I like that.
Why have we evolved to carry a genetic variant linked to chronic inflammation?
So that's a good question.
Mhm.
Why do we even have this? If this thing is supposedly if it's causing so much damage, why do we have it?
Yes, the unusual thing about this disease variant is in the ETS2 enhancer is that it is very common, with approximately 95% of people with IBD carrying one or two copies of it.
When they looked at people with IBD, 95% of them carry one or two copies. And this is something that's important to understand genetics at this
Mhm.
point, because if you're reading this, you're going to, it sounds to me like right away, if you're reading this, oh, 95% of people carry this ETS2 issue. They have it. Like it sounds like, so that's a huge percentage, right?
Mhm.
95%. That sounds, but when we actually look at it, do see that they do say that the disease variant in the ETS2 enhancer is very common because 95% of people carry one or two copies of it. But they say variant. And so I know when
A variant, it's different.
it's different than like a pathogenic mutation. There are tons of variants out there, and you
Mhm.
can go all your life with these variants and
Not have
not have
anything.
anything. So I would think this would be considered more of a mutation. I'm not a geneticist, but
Mm.
this is just again my thought process, and so I'm not trying to mislead anybody. I could be completely off track with this, but I mean to me it just suggests that if it is a variant or pathogenic mutation, do you only need one copy to have this ETS2 go crazy, or do you need 2? Like, do you need to get it is it passed on to you? Is this something like I may carry one and my husband may carry one, and if we give that to you,
Mhm.
does that mean you will have it because you will have 2 copies now? Or if I have a copy and my husband didn't, you only get 1 copy. So does that mean because
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
you have 2 pathogenic
Yeah.
mutations where you carry only 1 copy, so you're not going to have symptoms.
Thankfully,
Right. If you had carried 2,
I would.
you would.
I would.
And so I think there's a little bit of information here missing because these numbers seem to give more to their cause. But at the same time, what does that really mean? If it's common, a lot of us carry mutations and variations, and we just
And
get
they
one
don't affect
copy
us, yeah,
and they don't
because we
affect
only have
us.
one.
So I'm just interested, is it something that only IBD people carry, or is it someone without IBD? Can they walk around with one mutation and never get IBD? Does
Mhm.
it take two? So I think there's something there that is worth exploring, but I think it's not that clear in this. So anyways, that was my thought
Yay.
process. So
This next one,
this will be fun.
uh,
These are names.
I might need help pronouncing these. Let's see.
Pontus Gogland,
Pontus Skogland and, we're just assuming
Leo
this is how you say it. Pontus
Speedle,
Skogland and Leo
Spidel.
Spidel.
Sorry, Leo and
Uh,
Pontus, if that's your names
um, um,
in the ancient
what
genomics
is this?
laboratory.
Yeah, laboratory. The Crick, which studies ancient DNA, worked with James to shed light on when this genetic variant first appeared, showing that it is incredibly old, at least 500,000 to 1 million years old.
Yeah, that's old.
That's insanely old.
Okay.
Was even present in Neanderthals and other archaic
Humans.
humans.
So so this
Yeah,
means it's been around,
for a long time.
right? This variant. So again, not mutation, but variant at
Very.
this point. And I think that's important to separate. So this variant is super old, which means it's been around. It's not something that just popped up.
Mhm.
It's been there. That's crazy. All right, I'll let you go.
They found that the reason this variant remains so common is because switching on ETS2 appears to be an important part of the early response to bacterial infection. Before antibiotics, this may have had a protective effect during infections, which is probably why so many of us still carry the risk variant today, and why it is even more common in regions with high rates of infectious diseases.
So there's a lot of important stuff in there to me. And I hear that that the ETS2, it is common, and and again, they're not saying common in just IBD. It sounds to me like they're saying it's common in
In anyone,
anybody.
yeah, in
Um,
anybody.
so it
Not just
says
Crohn's disease or
it
IBD.
appears to be an important part of the early response to bacterial infection. Okay, so ETS2 does serve an important function in our
Mhm.
bodies. So would we want to shut that down? No,
No.
it doesn't. So you
No.
have to find a way to target it. So this is already, to me, seems like what they've been trying to do for
Mhm.
IBD. They keep finding things, and cytokines and all and the macrophages are talking about, but they have to give you things that shut these down, which can affect other things in your
Mhm.
body and can be deadly. So that's interesting. And they mentioned how before antibiotics, it may have had a protective effect during infection. So it sounds to me like it has an important job. Okay.
Mhm.
This is not
Yes.
like some variant that is like developed to kill you. It's a variant developed to save you. So that's really
I think
interesting.
something a good example would be, so I have these little books that I read. They're like oil magazines, and
Mhm.
there was a section in one of them that talked about sickle cell anemia, which I
Yeah.
thought this was very interesting because I always thought sickle cell anemia, it's bad. You know, it is bad.
Yeah.
If you have all sickle cell blood things, it won't clot easy, it won't flow, it doesn't carry as much
Your
oxygen. You
blood
have
cells.
anemia.
Yeah. You're right.
But in countries, I forget which one,
Malaria, but
malaria, where
where it's
malaria is
prevalent.
present, if you have a blood type that has normal blood cells, normal red blood cells, and then sickle cell blood cells, it's interesting because the sickle cell blood cells within the red blood cell mix make it harder for you to get malaria.
Right.
And so even though I thought sickle cell, it is dangerous, it's very dangerous, but if you have a mix, not just completely one or another,
Again, you carry the one or two
yeah, 1 or
copies, right?
2.
Like we were just talking about. It's very different things.
Yeah, so that's very interesting, that was
Yeah.
very interesting to me.
So I'm really glad you brought that up because that is a perfect example of when a variant comes about to do good, but then it can also go very bad. And
Mhm,
so I think that where they say here, many of us still carry the risk variant today, and why it's even more common in regions with high rates of infectious diseases. It's very similar to something like malaria.
mhm,
So it could be regional, and because you have more infectious diseases, this is something that's going to stick around. So it sounds like something they can't cure. It's something they would have to treat,
mhm.
but it may give you I guess, a better understanding of the disease, which is important
Yes,
because a lot of times we say we want a cure for this
Mhm.
disease, right? A lot of times we're like, we want a cure.
We need a cure, we want a cure.
But what
Yeah.
does that mean? Like, because I know this seems silly because you're like, well, cure, it's gone, treatment,
Mhm.
you still have it. But I think it's important to, and this was on kidshealth.org, and I just like the way it was said. So, a treatment is something that healthcare providers do for their patients to control a health problem, lessen its symptoms, or clear it up. Okay, so that's like treating it.
Yeah.
Treatments can include medicine, therapy, surgery, or other approaches. So, like IBD, like what's going on. A cure is when a treatment makes a health problem go away and it's not expected to come back. So, that would mean that to me, the holy grail would be to find something that you know exactly what it is, you treat it, it's gone.
Mhm.
Like,
That'd be
you
cool.
don't have to take treatments for the rest of your life. As long as you're taking treatments, you may have found a cause of it, but you can't figure out the cure for it. There is a difference. So I just think that's really important
Definitely.
to note the difference because we're all looking for a cure because we want something where these guys don't have to be treated. They don't have to go into flares. They don't have to have all these special diets. They don't have to have arthritis and just everything, the surgeries, everything that goes with it.
I think with a cure I
Mhm.
think a cure would be so cool,
Mhm.
but it would truly have to be something magical.
Well,
Like,
and that
something
would be the
yeah,
holy grail. I think
yeah.
that would be the major breakthrough because it seems
A cure that works for everyone. Because
right.
right now, if we find a cure, we don't know why people are so different from everyone else with Crohn's disease. Why someone with Stelara and Entyvio like me, it doesn't work for
Mhm.
someone else. So if you get a cure, it's gonna work for others, but then you're gonna have people who are left out, and they're
Right.
not gonna have anything.
So you have to really find that's why you have to really
Yeah,
find that actual cause. You can't in order to get the cure, you have to
you have
find
to find the
the cause.
cause.
That hasn't happened yet. And
Mhm.
so I feel like they're getting closer though. They're getting
Yes, they're
closer to
definitely getting
they're
closer.
finding clues. So
Yeah.
my takeaway, okay, not a cure.
Mhm.
Probably not the holy grail at this point. I
No.
feel like it's a little early in it. It could be. I mean, there
Mhm.
could be something here, and I hope it is, guys. Like that would be great. But I'm just still not gonna like throw a party yet because I think there's a lot more work to go. I also think it's basically to me it's another treatment and more understanding of the immune system and how it works. So I think that is a positive here because we do want more treatments.
Yes, we do. We
Because
do.
like you were saying earlier, some people fail all the biologics because certain ones don't help. Maybe the MEK inhibitor for somebody, if they can figure out how to do it safely, that may work for somebody. And maybe they can combine it with another one. So I
Mhm.
definitely think another treatment is super exciting. Is it a major breakthrough? I'm not sure because there's a lot of bioscience companies working on different treatments out there right now that may have better effects. We're not sure.
Yeah.
So I just haven't seen those articles. I've heard about them, but they're
And
not out
maybe
there.
less side
Right,
effects.
and less side effects, that's the goal, and also something that is cost effective for your insurance
Yeah.
because just because, like, these you may think, like, "This is great." Insurance may
You have a
say
cure, it's $2,000,000.
yeah, insurance might say, "That's not so great, we're not gonna pay for that." And so again, these are all factors that pop into my head, and I think that's why I'm such a skeptic because it's, like, too good to be true, or are we onto something? So I do think there's a better understanding of the immune system, which is 100% important. More research needs to keep going on. So I do like that, and I do think they're onto something with that
Mhm.
ETS too. But, it'd be interesting to see where it goes further. I just think that it's kind of similar to what I've heard in the past where they made breakthroughs where they figured out that, oh, interleukins, the
That's
IL-12, the
one thing,
IL-23,
yeah.
they're involved. Then comes Stelara. And then we have new ones that are JAK inhibitors that work very differently. We haven't even
Uh,
we haven't even talked about JAK inhibitors yet on the show, but those are the newer ones, and those
maybe
work
2.
differently as well. New information is good. Research is always important. So,
Mhm.
a headline does need to catch your attention to make you want to read it because most people are like, "What's IBD? I don't even know what that is." But
Clickbait is more likely to get your attention than
yeah.
actual
So
news.
there's that. And I think that they did a good job with the articles explaining, but this one is straight from the institute that discovered this. So I'm thankful. Thank you to everybody who sent it to me. Thank
Mhm.
you to all of you, who mentioned to me. But
And thank
I
you to the scientists who have been figuring this out.
I also think what this institute is doing, I think it's the Francis Crick. Is that what I said?
Yeah, Francis Crick.
So I think they're doing a great thing. And I'm excited that they're doing this. And I hope they continue on. I hope they find further breakthroughs. But don't stop helping to raise awareness and research with other places as well, everybody. So just keep the focus. Crohn's and Colitis Foundation still is working, they're working hard to make sure we're getting accurate information, and they are making sure research is also being funded because there's
Mhm.
many different facets of this. There's not just one. Good work on their part. I do think that maybe there's better things ahead, but are we there yet?
Not yet. All your article things that are attention grabbing, but not
Right.
like a lie technically.
So, anyways, that's it, guys. We're going to wrap it up because this was a lot, and you
Mhm.
guys can check out the article yourselves. I'm going to attach it in the description so you guys will be able to read this for yourselves because I think this is more important than what you read in the media, the
Mhm.
actual source. So,
Share this with your
yeah.
friends.
And also you can follow us on Instagram at Team IB Determined and the Reggie Project. Give both of those a follow, and you can listen to us on stations like Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.
And those will all be linked to Buzzsprout, and there's more
Yes.
too.
Yes. So if you're watching us right now, those are the stations
Mhm.
available for you to just listen. Like if you want to go for a run and pop in, your earbuds, you can
Mhm.
listen to us.
But if you do wanna watch us, you can go to YouTube, and if you already are watching us, make sure to like and subscribe, and if you wanna be notified every time we post a video, make sure you hit that bell icon.
Yes.
So bell icon lets you know whenever we post a video, a subscribe just recommends us more.
And we had a new couple new subscribers this week.
Yeah, so
So
thank you so much for subscribing, it means a
welcome.
lot.
Yeah. And we hope you guys found some value to this.
Yeah.
And if anything, just learned how to make sure you read through an article carefully
Yes.
and get a proper takeaway from it,
Mhm.
especially when it's something this important. So you guys have a good weekend, good work week,
Good
good
summer break.
whatever it is. So all right, guys, we'll see you next week on the next
Next
episode.
episode. Bye.
Bye.
We hope you will stick around, tune in, and reach out to us with your own journeys. We are excited to give you an inside view of what it takes to be a caregiver and what it's like to be a patient.
And most of all, we hope you'll maybe be able to play something you hear on here that might help you in your own life. Sometimes life changes, and it's all about how you handle the journey.